Welcome, wayward souls, to Echoes from the Loam. Witch bottles originated in 16th century England as apotropaic folk magic, protective charms used to ward off witchcraft and curses. They were filled with personal items like urine, hair, pins, nails, and sometimes bones, then buried beneath hearths or thresholds to trap malevolent forces. So light your lanterns, mark your doors, and stay away from the hearth. The old cottage had stood empty for 7 winters. Moss creeped over the stonework and the thatch sagged like a wet shroud. Marjorie Blythe stepped over the threshold with a bundle of kindling and a heart full of reluctance. Her husband's death had left her this place, his family's ancestral home, though he had never spoken of it. Inside, the air was still. The hearth, wide and blackened, bore a single crack across its stone base. She knelt to place the kindling and light the fire, but the kindling hissed, reluctant to catch. Beneath her, the hearthstone pulsed with warmth, and the stone shifted. Marjorie froze. She pried at the crack with an iron poker, and the stone lifted, heavy and wet underneath. Nestled in the hollow was a jar, grey, bulbous, with a snarling face etched into its belly. A bellamine. Its cork was sealed with wax, but the wax had split. Contained within were rusted pins, a coil of hair, and something pale and soft, like a clot of flesh, perhaps. She recoiled, turning away, and the fire flared up behind her, roaring into life. Later that night, she dreamt of a woman with no mouth. The woman had knelt behind the hearth, scratching at the floorboards with broken nails, her eyes sewn shut. When Marjorie awoke, the jar was gone, but the hearthstone was still ajar, reminding her this wasn't just a dream. Early the next morning, she headed out. The marsh road was slick and damp, and Marjorie walked it alone, the wind tugging at her shawl like a child's hand. The village lay low in the valley, and its chimneys coughing smoke into the grey sky. She didn't speak to anyone. She went straight to the edge, where the brambles grew thick and the air smelled of sage. Oswin Reed lived in a hut made of driftwood and bone. Cunning man, charm maker, whisperer of old things. He didn't open the door when she knocked. He just spoke. "You found it, didn't you?" Marjorie said nothing. The bottle beneath the hearth. "You opened it." "I didn't mean to." He opened the door and let her in. The hut was warm. Herbs hung from the rafters, dried and twisted. A bowl of teeth sat beside the fire. The walls were carved with spirals. Oswin poured her tea, and it tasted of nettle and iron. That bottle was not protection, he said. It was prison for a spirit, a witch. Ellen Hart. Marjorie felt the name hit her like a bruise. She was bound by your husband's bloodline, trapped beneath the hearth, fed pins and hair and silence. You cracked the seal, and she's loose now. What do I do? Marjorie asked, panicked. Oswin handed her a new jar, empty and cold. Remake the bottle. Your blood, your hair, your urine, pins, nails, herbs. Seal it with wax and bury it deep. Marjorie stared at the jar. "I can't," she said. "I'm not a witch, and I don't want to mess with things I don't know." Oswin nodded slowly. "I understand. As long as you know that she will take what she needs." A few days passed, and the jar Oswin gave her sat untouched on the windowsill. Rain tapped against it like fingers. Marjorie hadn't slept. The cottage creaked with things that weren't wind. She decided to return to Oswin's hut at dusk, give him the jar, ask for solace. But the door was ajar when she arrived. Inside, the fire was out. The bowl of teeth had shattered and scattered the teeth across the floor. The spirals on the walls had been gouged through. Oswin lay in the centre of the room, his limbs arranged in a circle. His eyes were gone. His mouth was stuffed with bramble and wax. And on the floor beside him, carved into the wood with a rusted nail, she was buried with doubt. Oswin's journal lay open on the table, and without thinking, Marjorie picked it up and took it home. Alone, she read it by candlelight. She read how witch bottles were not just protections, but they were prisons. Spirits bound by blood, sealed with bodily essence, and buried beneath thresholds to trap curses or witches. There was a binding ritual: hair, nails, urine, pins, wax. The bottle must be buried upside down beneath stone and sealed with a spoken name and a blood offering. Signs of unbinding were teeth falling from the mouth, spirals unravelling, animals refusing to cross thresholds, and dreams of soil and bells. And then a note: Ellen Hart's midwife, accused of blood magic. Her bottle was made by Oswin's grandfather, using the blood of the reed line. She was buried beneath the hearth of the cottage Marjorie now lives in. That night Marjorie dreamt of the marsh, but the water was black. A woman stood in it blindfolded, her mouth sewn shut with red thread, and bells hung from her wrists. She spoke without sound. Instead, the words seemed to burn into Marjorie's mind. "You live in my grave, you sleep above my bones. You will feed me, or I will feed on you." Marjorie awoke with soil in her mouth, choking as she sat bolt upright, spitting the soil across the bed. The jar she had forgotten to leave at Oswin's sat back on the windowsill, but it was cracked. Marjorie knew she needed help, but with Oswin gone, she had no choice but to ask the keeper. She walked to the edge of the village, past the chapel and the stone well, the old schoolhouse which stood crooked against the sky, its windows shuttered and its bell long silent. The keeper lived alone. Judith Calder, white hair like wire, fingers stained with ink and elderberry. She kept the records of the valley: births, deaths, trials, hauntings. Marjorie knocked as she entered and sat across from her, the cracked jar wrapped in cloth. "I need to know about Ellen Hart." Miss Calder did not blink nor look up. She was a midwife, a healer. They called her a witch when the crops failed and the children sickened. She lived in the marsh cottage, in your cottage. Marjorie's hands began to tremble. They made a bottle, Calder said, a Bellarmine jug, salt-glazed with a bearded face. They filled it with her blood and her hair, her urine, pins, nails, wormwood, buried it beneath the hearth, said it would trap her spirit and keep the valley clean. Did it work? For a time. Calder reached beside her and opened a drawer. Inside lay a parchment, brittled, yellowed with time. A trial record. Ellen's name scratched in ink. Her crimes, she said, were blood magic, dream poisoning, and bell rights. But she was buried wrong. With doubt, it says. No rites, no salt, no bell. So her spirit never passed. Marjorie felt the soil in her mouth again. The dream, the blindfolded woman, the bells. She's waking, isn't she? Marjorie said. Holden nodded solemnly. You have two choices, and you must choose. Remake the bottle, or let her finish what she started. The wind changed. It came from the marsh, low and wet. The villagers felt it first. Dogs refused to bark, milk soured in the pail, and the chapel bell rang once, though no hand had touched it in years. Marjorie stayed inside, doors locked. The jar sat on the table, empty. The herbs lay in bundles. The pins were rusting. Her hair was coiled in a bowl. But she could not bring herself to finish the bottle. Not while Ellen's breath still lingered in the corners of the room. She lit no fire, and the hearthstone remained ajar. Outside, the signs multiplied. Blindfolds appeared on fence posts stitched with red thread. Spirals were carved into the bark of trees. Children whispered of a woman walking the marsh at night, her mouth sewn shut, her hands dripping with soil. Marjorie dreamt again of Ellen. Stood in the cottage, her eyes open now, but her mouth still sealed. She held a Bellarmine jug in one hand, and in the other a bundle of hair. She placed the jug on the hearth and knelt. They buried me wrong, she said, though her mouth did not move. You live in my grave, you sleep above my bones, you will finish what they feared. This time when Marjorie woke, she woke with dried blood on her hands, but not hers. The jar on the table was full now, hair, pins, nails, soil, and the wax seal lay beside it. Desperate for air, for breath, she stepped outside. The village was silent. Every door now marked with a spiral, every window blindfolded. Ellen was finishing the ritual. Not to curse them, to complete it, to pass on. And Marjorie, still frozen by fear, still unsure, still waiting, was finally starting to see. The bottle was sealed. Marjorie did it with shaking hands, the wax melting over the cork like blood. She buried it beneath the hearthstone, just as instructed, just as Ellen had shown her in her dreams. And the cottage seemed to exhale. The air lightened, the shadows retreated. The spiral on the door faded to ash, and Marjorie stood in silence, waiting for something, anything, to mark the end. But endings are rarely clean, and that night she dreamt again. Ellen stood at the edge of the marsh, her blindfold removed now, her mouth finally open, lips cracked, teeth blackened. She held no bottle, only a bell. "You finished it," she said. "But it wasn't mine." Marjorie suddenly woke, again with the taste of salt and soil in her mouth. Her hands were clean. Her hearth was cold, the stone ajar and the bottle missing. Leaping across the room, she dug beneath the stone. Nothing. She searched the entire cottage. Nothing. Opening the door, she stepped outside to see if the spirals were gone. And they were gone. And so was the village. Not destroyed, just absent. No houses, no fences, no chapel, only marshland stretching for miles in every direction. And in the centre stood a single, blindfolded figure. Marjorie, but not quite her. The figure turned. It wore her face, her hair, her hands, but its eyes were sewn shut, its mouth sealed with wax. It held a bottle in one hand and a bell in the other. Marjorie screamed, and the sound echoed, but not from her mouth, from the bottle. She was inside, not cursed or punished, but observed. Ellen had not passed on, she had passed through. The ritual was not for her release, it was for Marjorie's containment. A new witch bottle, a new guardian, a new warning. And beneath the marsh, bottles multiplied. Each one sealed with wax. Each one contains a name. And the bell rang once more. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.